Hello, everyone. Nice to see your
Hello.
faces. Hi,
Hello.
welcome. All right,
Thank you.
so welcome everybody. This is the third session of Karl Hansen's open house event, and it's going to be about how colors influence our well-being. Just to briefly introduce myself, I'm going to be your moderator for the next hour or so. And my name is Gabriel, and I am a design journalist and copywriter based here in Copenhagen. And I'm currently sitting in Karl Hansen's Copenhagen offices, beautiful central Copenhagen offices. Sun is finally shining here. And I'm joined by three amazing guests. Of course, we have Knud Erik Hansen, who's been CEO of the company for the past 20 years, or almost 20 years. And then we have designer Ilse Crawford, who is currently in London, if I'm not mistaken. And she is the founder and creative director of Studio Ilse. And finally, we have Alice Rawsthorn, and she's an award-winning design critic and author. And she's also joining us from London. So welcome, all of you.
Thank you.
And yeah, so today we are, as maybe all of you know, but we're here to discuss color and its use. Why color? Well, Karl Hansen & Son and Ilse Crawford have just recently joined forces and are introducing a collection of chairs painted in a fresh new palette of really beautiful colors. And these are, of course, not any chairs. We're talking about the first 5 that Master Hans Wegners designed for Karl Hansen & Son in what would then turn out to be a 70-year collaboration. So yeah, over the next 40-45 minutes, we'll be discussing the collection, talking about what it's like to edit such a valuable design classic, choice of color, of course, and finally, how the public appreciation of color has changed in recent years. So first of all, though, for you to all get a sense of the beautiful collection, we have a short video for you. Yeah, so we'll watch the video right now.
We've worked with them for years and years. We like the idea of using painterly colours, that focus on constantly improving and refining and pushing and experimenting. Extraordinary, and to be in any way associated with that is obviously amazing. And in the context of Karl Hansen, and specifically Hans Wegener, his furniture is, you know, the perfect tool really for human behaviour. I mean, it lasts because it just does its job so well.
Fantastic. Wow, what a beautiful collection. Congratulations, Ilse, on this. So I would like to start with Knud Erik here to talk about first, why did you choose to add different colors to such important pieces of mid-century Danish design?
We have, in the past years, been doing quite a lot with colors. We have introduced the soft colors to our collection, especially of the wishbone chair, and it has turned out to be quite a success. And therefore, for us, it was very natural to continue. And for us, it was also very natural to ask Ilse to continue to work on a color scheme that would be something completely new. We have worked for many years with Ilse, and Ilse has used our furniture in a lot of projects, and therefore we felt that this would be an interesting combination of Karl Hansen and something completely new, which Ilse would be introducing to us. And I must say, it has been.
So this is now your first project working together?
Yeah. In colors, yes, definitely.
Or in color,
okay. We have, of course, worked on other projects together, and they have all done well. So, but colors we get into it. But colors are something which is very exciting, because we're also trying to reach a perhaps a little younger audience with our furniture, and I think we are managing here quite well.
Yeah. Now, Ilse, I wanted to ask you how you approached the task. You're giving new life to such iconic pieces of Danish design. Can you give us a sense of how your work started and how you approached it?
Well, obviously with trepidation. I mean, Hans Wegners is, a god around my house. I was just saying to Alice earlier, I was forced to actually reckon the possess between myself and the studio, and I have 25 currently, which I think gives me some insight into the beast. And I love them because they're so comfortable. They're reduced to the absolute simplest form of comfort, making themselves the nearest thing to a human. And I think that's right. However, being asked to think about them in colour was really interesting, because, as Erik said, they already do have colours. They have a library of colours that they use. And for the current purposes, they removed 12 colours from their library and wanted us to refresh that library, but specifically to focus on 5 for the masterpieces. So that small collection of the first pieces that Hans Wegners did with Hansen. And that's quite challenging, because they're in oak, so much harder material to paint than beech, because it's got quite a strong grain. So to find colours that would look fantastic on that oak base was already a thing. And also, obviously, to find colours that were not gimmicks or trends, because that really felt completely wrong. So we looked to the paintings of Per Kirkeby, who is a particular favourite of mine. There was a show at the Tate Modern just over 10 years ago, which was breathtaking. And his paintings, and he's a Danish painter, he was an abstract expressionist who was trained actually as a geologist. So his paintings are all really about sediment, and specifically about the Danish landscapes, the earth, the minerals, the plants, etc. And the colours are just so beautiful. They're those in-between colours. They're slightly subdued, but ones that you can use together and that create a sort of subtle beauty, which I felt was appropriate to the furniture, which is, of course, beautiful enough in itself. But these are colours that look great with natural materials. They look great with the wood. They look great with the paper cord and the rattan and so on.
Sounds good. And Alice, I wanted to ask you, kind of remaining on the same theme, what do you think about sort of this, editing existing design pieces? Just to quote Wagner, what he said himself, he said that the good chair is a task one is never completely done with. So yeah, what's your take on it?
Well, I'm so glad you shared that beautiful quote from Wegners, because it's not only so eloquent and so apt, and obviously said with great meaning, but also it sort of explodes the myth that these extraordinary examples of historical, either early 20th century or in this case mid 20th century design, have to remain sort of static and frozen, because Wegners not the only designer who enjoys finessing his work. Whenever I've met the great German industrial designer Dieter Rams, he will always produce some sort of widget from his pocket, and it will be part of a shelving system or another project that he's working on. And he says he keeps these things with him so he can constantly think of ways of improving them. And I think many other designers feel the same. I think there's a sort of mythology around these great historical examples of furniture design that are seen so ubiquitously in museum collections, design history books and so on, that they do have to remain frozen to be intact, to be accurate to the original. But the truth is that some of them aren't, particularly if, unlike Karl Hansen, the manufacturer didn't produce them right from the beginning and work with the designer directly, but subsequently acquired a license. There can also be very sensible, pragmatic reasons why it is pertinent to sort of relook at such products if there have been improvements in technology in terms of efficiency, durability, ecological responsibility, whether that's the materials, the finish, in this case the paints, then they can be integrated into the product to make it more robust, durable, sensitive, and so on. The critical thing is it has to be done from a position of great integrity, great care, great thoughtfulness, and respect without being overly respectful and ending up with stasis for the designer.
Can you expand a bit on that? That's really interesting how you talk about treating pieces with respect. Like how do you think it's done? How do you respect a piece?
Well, I think it's the care and thoughtfulness with which it's not only the design of any changes to the piece, but also its production, its distribution, its marketing. Every step, every stage of the manufacturer's interaction with the piece, if that is executed with care, thoughtfulness, sensitivity and integrity, then it's generally a success. If it isn't, then it won't be. And I can think of examples, particularly of early metal furniture from the 1920s and 30s, when metal fabrication technologies were very much in their infancy. If you look at very early examples of the work, the original prototypes of, say, Charlotte Perriand in Le Corbusier's studio or Eileen Gray, they're often much spindlier and much more eccentric than the so-called classic reproductions that we've become familiar with, because I suspect it's not that anyone sets out to make them dramatically different, but all the pragmatic pressures of production, meeting certain budgetary constraints, the availability of materials, having to suddenly change the design of a product to meet new health and safety restrictions. There can be all sorts of necessary practical pressures that incrementally impose changes, so take it further away from the original. I think any manufacturer risks that at their peril.
And talking about the choice of color, Ilse, you talked earlier about not wanting to pick sort of trendy, fleeting tones. We've seen the colors now in the video. Can you tell me what makes them? Why aren't these colors trendy? Like what makes a color last? And these colors last. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I hope. But I think not going for very obvious colours. So I think in this instance, obviously, the painterly quality is a large part, but it's also, I think, that they're in between colours. They're kind of colours you can not really put a name to, even though we have. I mean, they're not easy to categorise. They sort of move in front of your eyes. For us, I think, these are colours that provide a sort of a warm and beautiful, subtle mood, and that you can use together That was quite important to us because I think what the intention is, obviously, because we make spaces, is that these can be easily used in interiors. So you're not going to have to change your whole thing to use these chairs. They will just comfortably slide into your home and look fantastic with natural materials, which is obviously what Karl Hansen do most of the time. So it felt important that they were part of the family, if you like. And I think, you know, the fact that Kirkby did focus on nature, I think is important here, because I think not only those familiar colours, I think we, you know, often collectively assign meaning to colour. And I think right now we are looking at nature with renewed eyes, I would say. And I think that culturally we're very drawn to those. Whereas, for example, you know, 50 years ago, we were attracted to a very different frame of colours. Our perception of colour changes over time according to our values. We assign meaning to colour over time according to our values.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about how long the process of picking a chair and coloring it takes? I mean, let alone 5, but you know.
Picking a chair. Well, I didn't pick the chairs.
Well, you picked a chair, but like pick colors for the chair. Can you give us a sense about how long
I
the
was
whole
very lucky
process
to
takes?
have 5 beautiful chairs to work with, so that does help. But as I mentioned earlier, I mean, these were in oak, so that's already a point. So you have to find not only the colour but also the finish that works well on that as a material, because it's got a pronounced grain. So in the end, we came to a sort of what's called gloss 20, which is a slightly translucent, not super glossy, but, you know, quite glossy finish. And the 5 colours that we ultimately landed on out of the 9 that are going to be part of the collection as a whole for some time were the result of quite a lot of editing. It was 1.5 years, I think, roughly, because you have to, you know, you choose the colours, but then you actually need to see them on bigger samples, see them on the real material, see them together, you know, make sure that they work in different lights, also in the context of the existing collection. So there's plenty of layers to go through. And I think the 5 that we've ended up with needed to work together really, really well, you know, so that if you like, slightly, you know, bomb-proof, if you like, in terms of how you might choose them or combine them.
Yeah, nice. I would just like to remind our viewers that you can post questions in the comments below, and then we'll address them later on. Now I kind of want to move a bit to sort of the main theme, sort of past the collection, and the main theme of our talk, which is about, you know, color and our appreciation and how it relates to our well-being. It's interesting because this collection has actually done fairly well in Japan so far, a country that's, you know, maybe quite superficially speaking, but many kind of know for its appreciation of sort of raw natural materials, right? So I would like to ask all of you, how are we seeing people's appreciation of color changing? Is it different? What direction is it going in? What do you think?
Should I
go?
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Massive
Please, Alice.
I wanted to say that I think generally, and this is not just for Europe, but for most developed economies, our understanding of colour and our appreciation of it has become significantly more sophisticated in recent years. You only have to look at the paint market in terms of emulsion paint for walls. When Farrow and Ball, the British specialist paint maker, launched many years ago, it was seen very much as a niche phenomenon, and people questioned whether consumers really wanted to choose between 40 shades of white to paint their walls. And of course, we now all know that they absolutely do. This is a huge market, and this is an absolutely standard mass manufactured product. It's not particularly expensive. I'm talking about the paints in general. And people are clearly happy and willing to invest long periods of time and research into choosing very specific colours from their home. They clearly want them to be singular. They possibly want to have colours of their own. And I think this makes them much more sophisticated and considered in their choices of colours elsewhere. And I have to say that Ilse, I am her witness, has been a pioneer of this, because many, many years ago, she had a fabulous apartment in a warehouse near Tate Modern. And every time I went, she would say, "Oh, I still haven't decided what colour to paint the walls." And she wanted to paint them. Now, little
large
patches
swatches on the wall.
of grey paint remained there. How long was it for, Ilse? I mean, years.
Oh,
I have
come on, it
honestly
wasn't
never
that long,
seen
but it was quite long.
I have never seen anyone deliberate for quite so long on colour. So I salute Karl Hansen's decision to hire her for this project. No one else would care more.
But it's also true that the colour that I did end up on for that apartment has become rather a cult colour, and I still get kind of questions like, "What was that colour you used in your apartment?" It's like, haha, if only I knew. Yeah. No, but colour is also, I think that's also important, you know, that it's very specific, I think, to a place, to a light. But I think we are, to Alice's point, really understanding that now, even if we do still look to companies for guidance.
But how have you experienced it in your work?
I mean, we've always used colour, but I would say not lavishly, but I think a little bit of colour goes a long way. But I'm really interested, and I have always loved the way that in portraits, for example, you have this sort of amazing, you know, background colour, the browns, the umbras, the blacks, and then tiny amounts of colour then just come out luminously from the background. And I find with interiors it's the same. You're playing with what I call a frame, which has colour in it, but it's not, you know, what most people would call coloured. And then you play with the juxtapositions of colour on top of that frame.
Nice. And how do you think that this all relates to how we perceive well-being, for example, just in the home or in a space? I mean, you know, obviously, you know, our well-being is really very much connected to our choice in color, and you know, colors surround us. How do you see a shift in the understanding of the relation between color and well-being among the public?
I mean, I think we have a strong emotional response to colour. Certainly interesting right now how many people are sort of suddenly, you know, jumping into colour and embracing colour. I think, you know, after the events of the last year or so, I think that you see a massive shift towards that. But I think that's also historically typical. And if you look at, for example, what happened in the US in the 30s after the Great Depression and so on, colour was, you know, synonymous with joy. You know, whereas if you look at the sort of the 80s, the 90s, that was when we went into monochrome. You know, it's much more disciplined, if you like, and more synonymous with, you know, a more material age, shall we say. So I think it's, you know, colour and culture go strongly together.
One of the fascinating aspects of colour is that it is entirely subjective. And yes, it has a profound impact on our well-being, as Ilse has said, but it may very well be that each of the four of us has a very different perception of whether exactly the same shade makes us feel happy or sad. We all see colour slightly differently. If we photograph it, we may feel we've got a realistic image, but we've immediately distorted it. That every computer screen, every monitor distorts colours in different ways. But critically also, our response to colour tends to be very instinctive, just as it is to other haptic aspects of design, like touch, for example. We don't necessarily have a very extensive vocabulary to rationally define it, but we instinctively know whether we like it or not and how it makes us feel. But critically, colour is also infused with our memories. If something terrible you in a turquoise environment, it will probably affect your perception of that colour for a very, very long time. It also reflects our allegiances. I'm a Manchester United supporter, so unsurprisingly, I have red on my dress. I mean, very, very simple things like that do have a profound and long-lasting effect on us. But I think that's also why colour is so special, because our relationship to it is so intensely personal.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this, Knud, Erik?
I listened with a great interest because I mean it's some fantastic. It's very interesting what we are hearing here. I was thinking we're living in Scandinavia, where like Denmark, where in wintertime you have a darkness nearly all day. I think we have about 4 or 5 hours of light, and then it's all getting dark. And we are very dependent on colors. And what we see now is that younger people are not painting white anymore. They put in different colors to remind them of again of the nature of the spring morning or something like that, which perhaps subconsciously reminds them of something which we have to look forward to, and that we can visualize within the next couple of months. And I think that goes also with the colors that Ilse has given to us, that they are nature's own product. They are part of the nature, which is so natural for us to visualize, and where we are looking forward to getting back to that part. Because in the wintertime, we can't move anywhere. We sit inside, and that's why candles and things like that are so important things that we are using to brighten up our darkness. But and that is our other perspective. But Alice mentioned that we all have a different view, but perhaps we are all agreeing to what is being said, and can you say a theory behind it? But we come from different angles, and I can also mention if you go to a funeral in China, you must not wear red. And I mean, for European, you can laugh at that. But I can tell you, I don't go to a funeral today with anything red, because they say then you are the next one. and you know that is another power of color, and in one way or another that culture that grows on you, and well, you don't take any chances. That's how it is.
Yeah, the language. I mean, color is culture, isn't it? And I think for quite a while,
really
maybe part because of industrialization, you know, necessarily is rather, you know, reductionist, then we've lost that culture of color, I think, to some extent. But I think it's a fascinating area to dig into. It's, you know, absolutely rich with meaning beyond even, you know, the paintings and the use of color in that sense. And I think it's, you know, deeply fascinating as a topic. It's not just color, you know, choose Pantone, done. Not at all.
It's also
no, but I mean, it was,
I do actually remember one client saying, to Alice's point, you know, how long can it take to choose a color? I remember thinking to myself, a very long time. But I think he made, you know, come on, it's 5 minutes and over, you know.
Another fascinating aspect of colour is if you look at the historical symbolism of different colours, they're frequently contradictory. And this, I think, applies to almost every colour. So, for example, if we think of blue, we could think of the optimism, hope and cheerfulness and joy of a beautiful blue sky. But also you can think of getting the blues, being depressed. It has two completely contradictory meanings. Exactly the same applies to green, which is the colour of the environment, but also the colour of sort of rot and decay. And if you go through every colour, there are these very clearly defined, historically durable, but entirely contentious and contradictory meanings. And so I think that's yet another fascinating dimension of it, and possibly something that prods us towards choosing very subtly nuanced and specific shades.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really interesting to talk about all this. Also, just to shed light on the whole process of picking colors for chairs. That as Ilse said, it's something that just takes 5 minutes, because colors are so, not only are they subjective, but they're also so important and so culturally, important to so many people in different cultures. But yeah, I would like to move to questions because we received quite a few, I think. And I would like to start with a question for Knud Erik. It's from Gracie Bennett in the UK, and asking, how important is it for Karl Hansen to reimagine classic designs in this way with designers like Ilse?
It is, if you look at it from the company point of view, of course, it is it's an important move because we are taking something which has been kept for 70 years as it was when Wegners designed it, and now we are kind of changing the look of the furniture to something brand new. I think that is it requires a person of the magnitude of Ilse to do that. We cannot do it ourselves, but we need somebody that really knows and really puts some thoughts into it. And yes, it took some time, but we really appreciate it now. And we were not in any kind of rush, so it has been from both parties very interesting, and it means a lot also that we come up with something completely new, something that has not been seen before. Because if it was, we probably wouldn't do it.
But I remember actually one of the early parts of your brief was that you felt very comfortable in, if you like, the commercial specification area. That obviously you're extremely well known in that field, but where perhaps there was an area that didn't necessarily understand how to use it, is integrating it into domestic interiors, other than the obvious sort of dining chair use, that actually to have it as something that could be really integrated into the home was something that was quite interesting for you, as opposed to as the sort of iconic chair in the corner.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions here which are very much about color, maybe a bit philosophical as well. Ananya, she's asking, why is blue associated with trust?
I think that's the association, though one could argue as to whether this should make it trustworthy or not, with authority, particularly military forms. Also, historically, and for misogynistic reasons, its association with masculinity. And I think it's probably navy blue that's associated with trust more than any other shade of blue. Of course, there are many other shades of navy. So I suspect it's that militaristic association of service, order, the greater good, and so on. And also, if you think of the days of yore when people wrote with fountain pens, the choice of colour of ink was seen as very important, and black and a very, very dark blue were sort of the only respectable and sanctioned colours for doing things like signing legal documents or signing cheques. And so possibly there are memories of that too.
There's a book actually which I would recommend anybody who's really interested in the sort of background of colour to look at, called The Secret Lives of Colour. It's a wonderful book by Kasia St. Clair. So perhaps that could be something to pop out on a note afterwards. It's great as a sort of background to all such things.
Remaining on sort of a similar grounds, I have a question from Hirotsugu Tanaka from Japan, asking if colors have the same effect on people in countries with different climates.
Well, we just touched on it. Yeah.
I think probably not.
Yeah. No, probably not.
Also, it's light, not just climate. It's the whole context changes.
And also moisture, the density of the air that refracts colour too. But of course, that is in the days when we could travel, that was one of the wonderful aspects of it, discovering a completely different palette, just as you discovered different smells and other sensations.
I have a really interesting question here, actually, from Karl. He's asking, if color is cultural, how can it also be personal?
Well, because culture is always personal.
Yeah.
The two aren't incompatible. They're completely intertwined.
Right. But then when you say color, when you talk about a culture, maybe you would assume that within that culture, there's a similar appreciation of color, but then we're saying that color is also personal. So how do the two levels kind of?
Well, I mean, blue is associated with Chelsea, but Alice might not find it personally very attractive.
Or Manchester City. No, what I'm really saying is that our choice of colour is a cultural choice. It's one that even if we think we're making it because, I like that, it's a particularly warm and vibrant shade of red, there'll be many other layers of meaning, even beyond one's love of a football team, that affect our perceptions of it. And I think that's why cultural decision. But I mean, to the point of the question, which is a very good one, it's interesting that if you look at the symbolism of colours, they can have completely different meanings in different countries. So this also goes back to the funerals in China. Wearing red will be deemed inappropriate for funerals in many countries, but for very different reasons than assuming you to be the next to die.
But I mean, the other aspect of personal is also that your eyes change over time. So babies have incredibly sharp colour vision. So, and over time that actually changes. So actually, you only need to look at the paintings of Rothko. It wasn't just him becoming sadder with time. It's also, I think, your perception, literally, of colour changes over time.
I have a question here from Francine Ray, and she's asking if for each of you, if you can recall a moment in life where color has had an impact that you noticed.
I mean, personally, I can remember it very strongly as about 7 years old or 8 years old, where I decided very strongly that I liked brown and I would not have anything pink anywhere near me. I was very clear in my mind about this particular shade of golden brown, which I really liked. So, yeah, I think it's something that is very strongly attached to identity in a sense. It's something personal in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, for Ilse and my generation of women, certainly with a feminist sensibility, pink was absolutely taboo because of its stereotypical associations with diminished female roles for decades, and actually embracing it. I love it as a colour now, but my teenage self, my 20-year-old self, my 30-year-old self would have hated the thought that I would ever wear it. But one of my overpowering memories of colour is I'm extremely short-sighted. And I remember many years ago, I was staying with a friend and I woke up in the morning and there was sun coming into the room and all the bed linen was white. The room was painted white. They just moved into the house, and so there was no other furniture in the room. And because I'm so short-sighted, everything sort of melded together. It's one of the very rare occasions I've been happy to have poor eyesight. And I really felt as though I was floating in this sort of milky field because they were probably very different shades of white, but they all collided together. So that was a very beautiful experience.
Knud, if you have any memories?
Well, I right from I can remember I have always been fond of yellow, and I'm sitting here thinking, why that? But to comment on what Alice said about your and I think also Ilse did your view on colors when you get older. It is correct. Our eyesight changes. and perhaps that has got something to do also with what shade of colors we prefer. Maybe they get stronger as we get older. I don't know. But a few years ago, I was actually born extremely nearsighted, as well as you, Alice. And I had my lenses changed. They simply operate your lens out and put another one in. And I can tell you that when I woke up the next morning and looked out, all the colors have changed. They were much, much brighter. And so I know that we are changing a lot with age, and that could have a little influence on what we prefer as well. But yellow is something I have always loved it, and in different shades. And maybe that's an association with the sun, which we don't see too much here in Denmark.
Tesnim is asking how you think colors affect customer behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a behavioral science associated with that.
I can say we have experienced the use of colors on particularly the wishbone chair through the last 3 or 4 years with the soft colors we have introduced. And I must say this has changed the customer behavior considerably, because we are selling colors in Japan, which is highly unusual, where we used to sell only naked furniture that was not treated at all. Now we are selling a lot of, and especially also now Ilse's colors in Japan. So there is a change in the customer's behavior, and maybe we are touching a younger audience that has a different view on colors and different culture, trying to break perhaps a little bit with the culture that you traditionally have in Japan. I don't know, but it is very odd, because we are selling tremendous amounts of colored furniture now in Japan.
But I know there's also the psychology of using color to sort of, create effects. I mean, for example, in health centers where they'll typically have these sort of very bright poppy colors to cheer you up, and, I don't know, used heavy-handedly, I think they can have the opposite effect.
There's also the flip to the question, which is the corporate sector strategically using colour and encouraging the public to embrace a particular colour for financial reasons. So the fashion industry, for example, for many decades, there were colour forecasters. And it was a rather oligopolistic maneuver to ensure that all the key designers would use the same colour in their collections, so manufacturers knew which colour of fabric to order. Otherwise, they risked having to scrap it if they made the wrong choice. And of course, Henry Ford's famous quote, "Any colour as long as it's black," for the Model T Ford, which was because he was a brilliant pioneer of just-in-time manufacturing, and black is the quickest colour to dry, so that reduced the production time for the Model T Ford. And of course, these sort of colour decisions are presented to the public as though they're making them, when actually there's a manipulation behind it, which I suspect people are much more eclectic in their and singular in their appreciation of colour now. So I think that would be more difficult to do.
I have one last question. We have 5 minutes left of the talk. It's for Alice, and it's from Fulia from the UK, asking, you talked about how certain requirements and scarcity defined the works of Piron, and how do you think growing focus on circularity will reshape 21st century design?
Ooh, well, I hope radically and profoundly transform it, because clearly the climate crisis is one of the biggest challenges, of the maelstrom of huge challenges that confront us all, but it's one of the most urgent. And so circularity can be a very constructive strategy, particularly for manufacturing industry, to deal with it. But there is also a very interesting sustainable dimension to the choice of colour, the use of colour for the chairs by Karl Hansen, I think. I don't know whether you'd like to talk about it, Ilse, because it's very pertinent.
Yes, I mean, yeah, because it's, you know, it's not just the idea of painting furniture because, you know, just because. It's also a reality that, especially among the oak pieces, there's a number of pieces that are sort of, you know, not 100% in terms of color variation, but perfect in all other senses, you know, color variation or black marks on the wood. I mean, perfectly fine in nature, but not yet acceptable in the finished wooden piece. So painting them actually makes sure to minimize waste. And that's quite a number of chairs, isn't it, Erik? I mean, I think
Oh,
we
yes,
talked about,
definitely.
was it
Definitely.
12,000 or something last year that were painted?
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
It's a way of making sure that there's, you know, minimal waste in furniture production, but yet producing, you know, high quality pieces.
It's such a pity when, for instance, the oak, and it is mainly the oak that you see these small black grains in the wood. That it has been standing in the forest for nearly 200 years to grow up, and then you just throw it out. That is no good. We don't do that.
Yeah, maybe we should embrace
disrespect.
that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this turned into such an interesting conversation. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking part. And I think the recording of the conversation is going to be available on the website. So for anyone wanting to rewatch it, But thank you, everybody, and hope you have a lovely evening and the rest of the week, and enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Alice.
Bye.
Thank you, Knud.